All right, so here we are, and we're in Leviticus Chapter 2, and like I said, and I want to do some quick review just so we know exactly where we're at, Jimmy, but just for some, because I know like Ashley wasn't here or anything. So Leviticus, we talked last week, the ICUS there, that means part of, okay, or belonging to, so. And then, of course, we have Levi here. So the book means belonging to the tribe of Levi. All right? Belonging to the Levites, the people who are in charge of the temple, the people who are in charge of the sacrifices, the people who are in charge of the worship of God. Okay? That's the tribe that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam are part of. That's the tribe that the priests are, and that's the tribe that when you look over into them moving into Canaan, Jimmy, that they don't inherit any land because their inheritance is taking care of the things of God. So, who could tell us real quick something we learned last week about the burnt offering? Because we spent considerable. That's where we spent most of our time.
It's not to be eaten.
Yeah, you don't eat it. Sometimes an offering you do, and sometimes you don't. The burnt offering in particular is one that you don't eat, so let's appreciate that. Anybody else? Something that you remembered? Anybody? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, did anyone have any comments, questions about anything we covered last week or anything you've read that you want to talk about before we get started? All right, so go. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. Go
What's
ahead.
the difference between a burnt offering and a sacrifice offering?
Well, so we're going to talk about that. So, burnt offering means that it's completely consumed. All right, by the fire. And we talked about it.
Leviticus number 2.
Yeah, Leviticus Chapter 2. That's where we're at, Daddy. But the burnt offering that we talked about last week it represents the complete dedication to God. Okay, just like we talked about with salvation, where we come and we completely dedicate everything to God. And we talked about the mechanics of it, but that's what it represents. It's in the whole sacrifice, except for the parts it tells us to not burn. The whole thing is burned on the altar. Okay? And then we're going to learn about what the difference is with these other sacrifices. Okay? All right. Anybody else? Comments, questions?
But now the blood wasn't burned on this, was it? Because
it was poured. It was poured out. It was poured out. Yeah. Well, one is that it's not going to burn. You know. But again, it's without the shedding of the blood. All right. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. So it's without the shedding of the blood, there's no remission of sin. And the blood, if you remember, is poured out by the altar. Okay? It's poured out by the altar. It's not poured out somewhere else. It's poured out by the altar. So the focal point, the middle part, the center of the whole worship is going to be that altar right there. And every time you look at it, there's the blood on it because sometimes you were supposed to sprinkle on it, and then there's the blood on it, and then there's going to be the blood beside it. Okay? So anybody else? Did you have anything else you were going to say? I didn't want to interrupt you. Anybody? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we learned about different kinds of sacrifice and offerings, and right here we've got one type of offering. It's called a meat offering, okay? Meat in this particular part is just going to mean food, okay? So I'm just going to write that just so we have that as a remembrance. Just like when Jesus, that's an old English word for just food, okay? Like Jesus, Melissa, whenever he was risen and he appeared to the disciples, he asked them, do you have any meat? And then they handed him a honeycomb. And you're like, well, that's not meat, okay? But it's just the old English, it's just food, all right? Do you have any victuals? Do you have anything to eat? And that's why they say meat. So this is called a meat offering. And what is a food offering, okay? Now, I want everyone to understand that an offering is given at your own will, okay? An offering is not a tax. All right, an offering is An offering is not a tax. An offering is not something you have to give. Okay? Offering is always going to be of your free will. Okay? Even though God tells them to do this stuff, Cindy, it's never a you must, you have, it's always of your own free will. Just like offer, okay? If I offer you something, what does that mean?
You're going to give?
Huh?
You're going to give?
I'm going to give it to you, all right? So if you compel me to give you something, you compel me to give you money, you compel me to give you some, if these markers or this, this board, my Bible, whatever, you compel me to, it's not an offering, okay? But to give freely, to give of my own will is an offering, and the root word of that is offer, okay? So let's go ahead and read Leviticus Chapter 2, and we'll talk about what's part of this offering. So, ladies and gentlemen, Leviticus Chapter 2, starting in verse 1, it says, "And when any will offer a meat offering unto the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense thereon." Okay, so already, Pastor, we're already in the part where if you just read it and it said meat offering, you're like, wait, why are they giving flour? Okay, so again, just reinforcing that, it just means food. Okay, so when you give a meat offering, a food offering to the Lord, your offering shall be of fine flour, and shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense thereon.
What's frankincense?
It's not a spice. It's actually a tree. That's a tree gum. Tree. Yeah, thank you. Tree sap, and it's one of the gifts that the wise men brought to Jesus. Yeah. Yes, and so you're supposed to put frankincense on it. Well, the showbread that they talk about that's inside the temple is actually sprinkled with frankincense. Okay, so it's
You'd think of that as being a perfume. The way he talks about it.
Yeah, well, and it was.
Well,
It was. And as far as why is it on the bread, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know why it would be on the bread here. Anybody else comments, questions so far?
But it's probably just a seasoning if you want to.
Yeah. I mean,
Casera is used as medicine also.
yeah. So those things they're going to have multiple uses, and so yeah, it probably does have flavor. As far as I don't know. Okay, I don't know what it tastes like. I've never tried it. I've seen little.
If it's one of those things that come in different forms, like it can be a powder that can be a seasoning, or if you add something to it, it turns into like a perfume type.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, completely possible. And it's again one of those things. It's kind of like the oil they talk about. It's like they had oil for the light, but then they had oil for this and oil for that. And oil. It's like it's olive oil, but they're just using it different ways and adding different things to it. So, all right. Anybody else?
It says it's an aromatic gum resin attained from the boswellia tree.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right.
I mean, it's got a whole more, but
Yeah. Well, you can actually get incense. I've seen it in the store. There's actually frankincense in it. So, so it's an incense. As I think Gwen just said, a medicine that they would do. So here, you're actually sprinkling it on the food, okay? And they would sprinkle it on the showbread that they had inside the temple. All
they
right?
said it resembled what we call an ash tree here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? So here's what it says. Now, so if someone wants to give a meat offering, if someone wants to give an offering of food to the Lord, here's what they're going to do. So it says that you bring fine flour, and you pour oil on it, and you put frankincense on it. And then it said, and he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. Now, notice that this is the bearer, the person. And it says he, again, we understand it's just mankind. Okay, it's the people, man, woman, boy, girl. When they want to give a meat offering to the Lord, that they're bringing it to the priest. They take the fine flour, they pour the oil on, they sprinkle on the frankincense. It said, and then he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priest. Just like with the burnt offering last week, Melissa, that the person bringing it is involved in the whole process. Okay, and then Sarah, it says, he shall take thereout his handful of the flour thereof, and of the oil thereof, with all the frankincense thereof. And the priest shall burn the memorial of it upon the altar, to be an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And the remnant of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is, hey, just a second. Just let me get to the end of this verse. I'll let you say. I'm not trying to get you there. Just a second. But it says, it is the thing most holy of the offerings of the Lord made by fire. So go ahead.
It was for them to eat the remnant.
Yeah, it was. It was. So the priests, as we talked about, they don't inherit land. They're not going to have land. Where they will have some cities that you see later on, but they don't have land, Tanya, where they can grow crops. Okay, they don't have a means of getting their own food to eat. And so this is like we talk about with our church covenant, because it says here, it says we engage to maintain family and secret devotions, to religiously educate our children, seek the salvation of our kindred and acquaintances, walk circumspectly in the world, just in our dealings, faithful in our engagements, avoid all tattling. Okay, that's all. I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong paragraph, but it says here, watch over brotherly love, remember one each other in prayer, aid each other in sickness and distress, cultivate Christian sympathy in speech and courtesy, slow to take offense and be reconciled. But it talks about that we support the ministry. So this is supporting the ministry, because those priests are not going to have a way to make something of their own. So the bearer, the person bringing the offering, they bring a bowl of flour with oil and frankincense on it. They take a handful out. They give that to Aaron. And then Aaron gives God his part. Okay? Aaron gives God his part. So Aaron burns it on the altar. And then it says the rest is for Aaron and his sons and the Levites, just in general, to use.
Do you reckon that they came pretty often, regularly, for them to have enough food that they needed?
I don't know. I hope so.
Well,
I hope they did.
Yeah. They had to have food like everybody else.
Yeah, because it doesn't tell us.
No.
It doesn't tell us how often they came. It doesn't give a prescription for how often they're supposed to come. It just says when anyone will. When anyone does want to bring it, they can.
But they do that. A lot of people do that to support, make sure that they have food, right?
Yeah, that's
willingly give.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. So, anybody else comments, questions so far? Anybody? So that's if they just bring the ingredients, okay? So you can just bring the ingredients, and you can just bring the ingredients and give it to the priest. Or it says, in verse 4, it says, and if thou bring an oblation of a meat offering baken in the oven, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour mingled with oil, or unleavened wafers anointed with oil. And if thy oblation be a meat offering baken in a pan, it shall be a fine flour unleavened mingled with oil. So, ladies and gentlemen, you could also just bring them bread that you've baked. You could bring bread as part of this offering. Oblation here means offering. Okay, so that word oblation that you see there, that's not anything special. All it just means offering. Okay, when you bring your oblation, okay, it means you're bringing your offering. That's all that is. Okay, so oblation just means offering. And I just want us, and I'm not trying to get too deep into some of this, but I just want us to understand, Jimmy, these words. Rather than us having questions, what does that mean? I want us to understand these words in the context. So,
were the burnt offering and these meat offerings, were they for a specific sin, or are they just because
this one is not. It's not for sin. It's not for sin. And I'm not trying to jump you there. It's not for sin. It's not tied to anything. The burnt offering last week, it was for sin, but it was not for specific sin. Okay? Because you have you're going to have 4 types of offerings, okay? So you're going to have 4 types of offerings. And we won't get too deep into this, but let's just briefly, just so we know, okay? So 4 types of offerings. Okay, you're going to have your burnt offering. That is for sin, but what it is just it's very similar, as I was saying, like to to us being saved, to our salvation. It's not for a specific sin. It's like for the whole sinful nature. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so burnt offering, it's like whole dedication to God. Dedication to God. Okay, and so just whole dedication to God, and then just like burning the sinful nature. Okay? And I'll try to make a little something for you guys so that way you can remember and keep all these apart. So it just means a whole dedication to God, and you're burning the sinful nature. Just like when we came to be saved, we forgot, we died, okay? We died, as Jesus told Nicodemus. He said, you enter into your mother's womb. He said, you're born again. We die, the old man dies, and then we're a new person. All right? That's what this represents. It's not for a specific sin. It's not like you steal your neighbor's goat, okay? You're giving a burnt offering. No. This is when somebody decides that I'm going to dedicate my life to God. I want God to be the master of my life, all that. This is a dedication to God and just a burning of the sinful nature. All right? The meat offering, okay? The meat offering is not tied to sin. Just like this, is that we don't just pray when we've sinned, okay? We don't just give service because we've sinned. We give service because we want to. We pray because we want to, okay? It's not tied to sin, and I'm going to put given just because, okay? Just because the person wants to, all right? This is not tied to sin. This is twofold. This is just like, you could pull so many parallels here, okay? But it's just like we give our offering, okay? We have an offering plate that we pass. We give an offering to the church. It's for the support of the ministry, the support of the building, right? So.
But we're still talking about a free will offering.
Exactly. Yeah. No one's compelled. No one has to do this. No, it's not a tax. No one's compelled. It's not tied to a sin. It's because, like Jeff Ledford said a year or two ago, it came up in business meeting about why is it just the cemetery fund that takes care of the church grounds? The pastor explained and said, that's the way it was set up so long ago. And then Jeff said, okay. He said, so I guess that means that if I really want the outside of the church taken care of, he said, I ought to donate to the cemetery, So the same way, it's not anything you have to do, but to give to the upkeep, of the Levites. But we're also, and I think it is this one, and don't quote me on this, and that's why I try to wait sometimes till we get closer to the end. But this also represents a communion with God. Because if I think it's this one, may not be.
To me, it's
Okay.
showing a two-purpose offering.
Mm-hmm.
It's one, to feed Aaron and his family.
Mm-hmm.
And two, it's to show God that you're still in love with Him.
Yeah. I mean...
I think it's for obedience.
Well...
It's just like when whatever God places on our heart to give to the church, that as long as we're obedient and give it, then our church will be taken care of. It's the same thing with this meat offering. If people give what God has told them to give, then everybody will be taken care of.
All right. Who else has got something that you want to talk about?
There's a whole lot of different kinds of meat offerings too, ain't there?
Yes. So, I'm just trying to check, because I don't want to misquote anything. But this is okay. So if the burnt offering represents for Christians, if it represents our salvation, this kind of represents like our service and our giving. Okay. We serve because we love Him. We give because we love Him. We give like I was trying to read our covenant a second ago. We give to assist the poor and
For the upkeep.
yeah, and for the upkeep of the church, and also to perpetuate the ministry.
Yeah.
All right, like some churches when Dad was pastor at Black Creek Crossroads. I remember as a kid, a couple missionaries. Do you remember that, Dad, from one of the Indian tribes out west? Came and talked to the church for a few minutes because the church supported some of the missionaries. And every church has a different mission, and that's okay. But again, us understanding that this is going to represent kind of your service. Okay, this is representing your offering, your giving. Okay, Lydia wanted to come and sing. All right, that's a service. That's giving. Okay, so when we pass the plate around, and it helps the ministry, okay, and it keeps the building, it keeps the lights on in the building. That's also part of it. When the church helps the poor, when the church helps the pastor, when the church helps this and that, that's what this is. Okay, does that make sense? So not every offering is tied to sin. Okay, this is one that you don't have to have done anything. For that matter, you don't have to have done anything for this one because they're all given free will. But this one is not directly tied to sin at all. This one represents the whole sinful nature of mankind, where this one, the meat offering, is just representing the giving. Okay, Lord, I love you. Lord, you've blessed me. You've blessed my crops. You've blessed my family. And God, I want to give you an offering as part of it. All right?
Talks about the greatest of these is charity. Remember that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when he talks about he said charity doesn't bond itself. He said grace of these is charity. So giving, okay, giving. Anybody else comments, questions?
I got a question.
Go ahead.
And it's kind of off the lesson a little bit.
That's all
But
right.
have you ever come to a homecoming and all these mothers and the wives and grandmothers and all bring their dishes and sit them on the table, and pastor come around and give thanks? And have you ever seen not enough?
No.
Have you ever seen after they get done eating that they, hey, me and my family, we're going to get us a plate or two to take with us to have for supper? And it seems like sometimes you carry more back than you brought. And I know that don't make sense. But what I'm saying, you can't outgive God.
Yeah.
And I know these ladies is not taking this for look what she's fixed this, and they're not doing it. It's not for that. It's for the nourishment of the body.
Yeah.
To help get down through the day.
Yeah.
And I mean,
But it's also
Years ago-
showing the brotherly love.
yeah. And years ago at Slick Rock, we never did not do without food, did we? Had drank. You know what I'm saying? God takes care of things. But we first need to put forth the effort. And we just can't sit at the house in our easy chair and say, okay, no, the Lord's he's going to have this all set. It's not the way it works. We're supposed to be obedient to Him.
Yeah. So
If you don't work, you don't eat.
yeah. I heard a minister say it this way. He said, talking about God giving. He said, you can give to God. He said, you can shovel all you want. He said, but God's always got the bigger shovel. God's always got the bigger shovel. He said, you can give as much as you want to God. He said, but God's always got the bigger shovel. Is what he said. I liked that.
And I wasn't trying to get you off.
No, you're not. No, because that's a good point. I mean, well, just like going off that same thing that you're talking about. That little boy, they're on the Sea of Galilee. His mom packed his breakfast for him that morning, or lunch, whatever. And what was going through his mind whenever he heard that Jesus needed something to eat? And all he took him was 5 little pieces of bread and a couple of fish, and not understanding what he was going to do with it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that, and it never tells us about who that boy was. It doesn't tell us anything else about it. But I think about that story, and it's like, what was going through his mind? Was he thinking, Jesus is hungry, so he needs this, but Jesus was going to do more with it? So to tie all this together, and we're still.
God said, give, and I can give unto you.
Yeah. So just to tie all this, just to tie all this together, it's like, when you give to God, okay, you're able to help somebody else, and God's able to take that and grow that. And this is not a prosperity gospel thing, okay? But God's able to let that grow. And guys, it could always come back to us. Again, not that's why we do things, but we are supposed to give. When we see somebody who wants, James told us. I love the book of James. You've probably heard me say that before. I love the book of James. James, if you've never read James in the New Testament, you really need to. James talked about, he said, what does it mean? And I'm paraphrasing, okay? He said, what does it mean? He said, if you see somebody in need, they need food, they need clothing, they need shelter, whatever, and all you do is say, hey, okay, be warmed and filled, God bless you. He said, and you don't give them those things they need. All right? You don't give them that stuff. So, this is our service, okay? So, if we're looking for parallels for Christians, okay, if this represents salvation, the burnt offering, which is a total dedication to God, you're burning the sinful nature, because that whole sacrifice was burned on the altar to ashes, okay? This meat offering given to the priests, this is your service, okay? This is the money that you put in the offering plate to take care of the church, to help the ministers. When we have a revival, we pass the plate around so the ministers can buy their gas and they can buy food while they're here and all that. Okay, that's your service. All right. Anybody else comments, questions?
You know the bones burn up too? I mean, you know.
I don't know, Milford. I wasn't there. But
No, I mean.
But you got a good question. It's like, how? Well, just like they're burning fresh meat.
I know.
Because they killed the sacrifice right there.
Yeah. Well, what happened to the bones? I mean.
It says everything was burned.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it says
but-
the whole thing was consumed.
But
know.
when they go like a crematory, the bones don't all burn up, do they?
No. They have
See?
to crush them.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
I see your point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. All right. It's just kind of like the part, and I kind of giggled at it. I think it was last week. It's like the wood. It's like the offering on the wood, on the fire, on the altar. It kept saying that a couple of times, like everything's in place. Well, I don't know. Maybe if you put everything in place, maybe God just take care of all of it. I don't know. I don't know what the cleanup was like. Just like the
Like that blood.
yeah.
I read one place. Now it said, I may be wrong on this.
Yeah.
But I thought God sent far down and evaporated that blood himself.
No, you're talking about Elijah. Elijah on Mount Carmel, where he built the altar and he put the offering on, and he didn't put any fire on it, and God destroyed the fire, the wood, the altar, and licked up all that water that they had poured on it. It said even licked up the dust that was there. And I see where you can mistake that.
No, I thought he's over in the before this way the car was doing that burn offering. Seemed like I read something that God could come down and swept that blood up somehow. I don't know about how. Send a fire down and it just goes. I may be wrong.
I don't know. Is
Do you
anyone
remember?
else?
Do you anybody remember that?
Yeah, I remember what Jordan was talking about there.
Yeah.
Elijah had that contest.
Mm-hmm.
He said, the God that answers by fire, let him be God. And
We're talking about the bones, I don't know if it's what we've already studied when they were building the altar, or if it's later. But that there is like a tray under it, like for the ashes and
Yeah,
stuff, so
yeah.
whatever, and there was a certain place that tray had to be done.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess for the remnants, if there's anything left in
Yeah.
ashes
yeah,
to get rid of.
yeah. So again, I don't know. I wasn't there. But that's the stuff that we think about. It's like, but what do you do with all? I asked Dad one time, because Dad was a butcher, and I said, Dad, they talk about not breaking a bone in the Passover lamb. I said, and they talk about how they were supposed to cut it apart and not break a bone. I said, how could you do that? And he explained it to me, and we may have been cutting a turkey or something, maybe at Thanksgiving. He said, sometimes, he said, when you're cutting meat, he said, there's just certain tendons you can hit. He said, it just all comes to pieces. Instead of having,
And a lot of your joints, you can
Yeah.
take a knife and just
Yeah.
slice right through a joint.
Yeah,
I could cut
yeah,
chicken up easier with a knife than I could a saw.
yeah. Yeah, because you're not breaking the bone. You're not cutting. Again, that's a question you have. It's like, well, how does that work? But as far as some of this, I'm more than happy to tell you. I have no idea.
What I always thought was peculiar, in order to sell the product, you had to cut it up, then put it back together, and display it.
Yeah,
Kind of like a funeral.
Yeah, yeah.
What I'm saying,
Yeah,
but now
yeah.
it's not,
yeah. So, anybody else comments, questions so far?
This is what the dictionary says about a burnt offering. It says the kind of offering was described as that which goes up to God. It was termed whole because the entire offering was to be burned upon the altar. It was termed continual to teach the nation of Israel that their sinfulness required a complete, continual atonement and consecration.
But these was unleavened. What we're talking about now is unleavened, right?
Yeah.
Didn't have no seasoning.
Yeah. Only thing it had was that frankincense, and that frankincense is not a leavening agent. And that was another thing I was going to bring up, because we've explored some other parts of it, and that's okay because we're still on the point. But all of this is going to be unleavened. That flour that you bring, and you put the oil on it, and you put the frankincense on it. Aaron's going to ask you. Okay, well, I assume he will, but he's going to ask you. Is this unleavened? So you go to the store, get not that self-rising, get that all-purpose flour. That's what it would be. And that leaven, I think we talked about before, but that leaven, as Jesus talks about it later on, it represents sin, okay? Because it's a changing, all right? It's when you put yeast, when you put baking soda or baking powder, or if you're making a bread, and you put yeast in it, and it gets puffy, you're creating a chemical reaction, okay? And to God, that represents sin. That's why because it only takes a little bit of that yeast to leaven that flour. And that's why Jesus said later on, he said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Because all it takes is a little bit of belief, a little bit of their doctrine, he said, and it'll soak through the whole thing. So this is unleavened. It's pure, okay? It's just, because we're about to see down here where he asks for salt, okay? So it's all pure ingredients, okay? No leavening agent, no yeast, nothing like that. All right. Anybody else, comments, questions?
So, Aaron and them didn't have much variety of meals.
No, they didn't. Well, for that matter, you say that. Okay, for that matter, and this is just historically, none of them really did. I think I may have said last week, I may have said before, I can't remember, but actually about 60 to 70% of their diet, okay, I'm messing up here.
But you're fixing to get into where they get some protein.
Yeah, we are. But 60 to 70% of their diet was bread. Okay? For all of them. This is rich and poor alike. This is just common people. Okay? 60% of their diet's bread. Okay? The meat is going to be a small portion, and then the rest is going to be meat, it's going to be, not meat. It's going to be bread mostly, okay, and then vegetables, your herbs and all that, and then it's going to be a little bit of meat. Where now, as Americans in the 21st century, we flip that. Where you got to have the big steak, you'll have a potato, and you'll have, and you'll have a roll. Which is, I think you brought up before when I talked about that. That's why Jesus said he's the bread of life. Okay? He said, and it said the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. All right? When he says that, he's meaning, look, if bread is 60 to 70% of their diet, he's saying, look, don't worry about what you're going to eat. Like you said a second ago, yeah, you're going to work for it and all that, but see, I'll give it to you. He's not just talking about, I'll give you a piece of, he's not talking about, I'm going to give you a piece of Marita light bread. He's like, look, Lord, give me my daily bread. Well, that means he's going to give you everything you need. He's going to give you exactly what you need to do your job. All right? So, and that's history, and I know, but I want to connect it just to make sure that we understand. What the difference with Aaron and the priests would have been that if there's any bread that's risen, okay, that they set it aside and they let it rise and then they bake it in the oven. They can't have that. Because, again, they're set aside to be pure and holy. But as far as all of those people 3,000, 4,000 years ago, they don't have very much variety in their diet anyway.
So if they
Okay.
came out of the temple and walked through the village and somebody offered them leavened bread, they had to turn it down.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and, all right, we got about 20 minutes. Okay, yeah, we're still good. It says here, and 5, and this is, man, all this conversation, and all we read was 5 verses. I love it. All right. It says, and if thy oblation be a meat offering baking in a pan, so you could bake it, but I mean that's what Melissa does when she, or Brenda does when they make the communion bread. You've got to bake it in a pan, okay? So it says, if you bake it in a pan, okay, bake it in the oven or bake it in a pan, it's still got to be unleavened, okay? But it says, it shall be a fine flour unleavened, mingled with oil. Okay, and then 6. It says, thou shalt part it in pieces. That means you're just breaking it in pieces. And pour oil thereon. It is a meat offering. So when it's baked, and you mingle it with oil, and you make everything that you need, you make it and you bake it, then you're going to tear it apart, and you're going to pour some oil on it. It says, and if thy oblation be a meat offering baken in the frying pan, it shall be made of fine flour with oil. Okay, so now they're just covering here, and that's the thing about the law, is that it gets at times very specific. It's like if you bake it in this pan, if you bake it in this pan, if you bake it in, all it's doing is just basically saying the same thing. Look, no matter how you prepare it, this is what you do with it. All right, it's not like a box of cake mix, or it's like if you bake it in this kind of pan, you got to do it this long. If you bake it in this kind of pan, you got to do it this long. God's basically saying, I'm covered all my bases. I don't care how you fix it. I don't care even if you fix it at all. You do it the same way. All right, that's what they're doing here. It says in 8, it says, and thou shalt bring the meat offering that is made of these things unto the Lord. And when it is presented to the priest, he shall bring it unto the altar. So you bring a basket of bread to the priest. Okay, and it says, the priest shall take from the meat offering a memorial thereof, a piece. Because before, Tanya, it tells us he takes that the person, the bearer, takes a handful of flour and gives it to Aaron and he burns it on the altar. This time, it says you bring the whole basket, you give it to Aaron. It says Aaron takes a piece, the priest takes a piece, and then it's a memorial for God. They burn that piece. Okay, they're not throwing a whole basket of bread on there. You didn't bake this long enough here, we're going to burn it all. No, they burn a piece because, again, you give part to God. Okay, this is representing, we're giving to God. And then it says, and the priest shall take from the meat offering, this is a 9, it says, and shall burn it upon the altar. It's an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And that which is left of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is a thing most holy of the offerings of the Lord made by fire. No meat offering. No food offering at all. No meat offering. When ye shall bring it unto the Lord, shall be made with leaven. For ye shall burn no leaven, nor any honey, in any offering of the Lord made by fire. Okay, so he's giving explicit instructions. He said no leaven. He said nothing of honey. Okay, he's talking about pure ingredients. Okay, he's talking about pure ingredients. So let's take this trail just for a second because we've not got too much. But what's flour? What is it?
It's corn and ground.
Okay, yeah.
Whichever one you want.
Corn or wheat, ground. All it is, grows out of the ground. You take it, you husk the corn or you thresh the wheat and you grind it up, in the millstone, and it's pure corn, pure flour.
What we mean by grain offering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about what's oil? When it talks about oil, Cindy, what's the oil?
Olive oil.
Yeah, just olive oil. You take olives, you press it, it's oil. Okay, there's no change. There's a physical change, but there's no change in the ingredients. Frankincense, of course, is the tree sap it talks about, which is used as a perfume and all that. But now, like bringing the leaven, okay, the yeast. So yeast if you were bringing something that's leavened, I said a second ago, that chemical reaction, that change. Okay, that change. It makes it's impure. It's not unclean, as we're going to see later, but it's impure. It's not the pure ingredients. It's not, because, Melissa, what do you put in the communion bread?
Flour and water.
Flour and water, and that's it. Okay, flour and water, and that's it. Now, honey. What's honey?
Sweetener.
Well, it is. It is, but what is it?
It's a sweetening.
It is. Yeah, it is. But what is honey made of?
Flour, sugar.
Flour.
Yeah.
The pollen.
Okay. It's the pollen. It's the pollen that the bees make. So again, you see a change. Speaking of bees, a fly just flew at me. But it's a change. Okay? Yeah, it tried to. It did. All right? It did. It tried to. So it's a change. Now, it's not saying that you couldn't use that at home, but it's saying for this, it has to be pure. Because again, the bees, they go out in the springtime, they go out, they go to the flowers, they go to the sourwood and the honeysuckle and, all those different types of honey you beekeepers have. They take that pollen, they go back to the hive. Basically, it's bee vomit. All right, they eat it and then they vomit it out and they seal it up in the comb and that makes honey. It's not saying you can't eat honey, but it's saying for these offerings, the people, it said you just can't burn any honey, you can't burn any leaven on the altar.
Do you think part of it also is that the flour and the oil come from things that come from the ground, and the honey comes from something from an animal?
It could.
Insect
Well,
that
it could.
makes
It could.
impure.
Yeah, it could. And again, there's the different interpretations of this. It could. That's a good interpretation. I hadn't thought of
But
that.
you couldn't offer any honey, right? It had to
Yeah,
be
that's what it says
just
here. Yeah.
Was it had to be burnt, right?
No.
No,
You can't even offer it.
no, you can't even offer it on the altar.
Okay.
Yeah, that or leaven. And honey is the thing that we don't hear about the prohibiting of. Okay, and it's like I said, it's not that they can't eat it. You see, Samson ate honey. All right, Jesus ate honeycomb. It's not that you can't eat it, but it's that when you're giving the offering, you can't do any leaven because it's a change. Okay, it's changing the natural form to something else. You can't give anything that was made with leaven. So like your light bread, okay, your biscuits, all the stuff that we make, that has.
It ain't something that's got to go through a process.
Yeah, exactly. It's the pure ingredients, and then the honey. Of course, the honey, like I said, it's the pollen. The bees change it into honey, and you could put it on your bread. You could eat bread like with honey, but you could not take it to the priest with honey on it, because it's not a pure ingredient.
So
And maybe, and like I said, I like Cindy's point of view. Maybe it is because those other two things come from the ground, the flour, okay, the oil that comes from the ground, versus like the change that comes out of the others. But anyway, I like that. So go ahead, Jimmy. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So, this day and time, we got false advertisement because honey is not pure honey.
Yeah, it is. But like I said, there's no rule against eating honey. But when you're giving the offering to God, just like we talk about giving of a pure heart, okay? We talk about giving of a pure heart. That Gary Griffith or somebody I heard one time said that was talking about us giving our money, help the church, help the ministry, and all that. He said if you're going to hold it against God, he said just keep it. Okay? He said, give out of a pure heart. That's what it tells us later on, is give out of a pure heart. So, when we give our service, just like that yeast, that leaven, that yeast, and just like that honey, guys, give out of a pure heart. Give because you're wanting to give.
That honey comes from many different sources.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
comes from trees, it comes from flowers,
Yeah.
it comes from grass,
Yeah.
it comes from fruits.
Yes.
So,
Let me ask a question. Might be stupid. Did they use sugar and honey sugar and salt back then?
Salt,
Salt.
yes. Now sugar, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the honey is going to be your sweetener that you use.
Yeah.
But salt, yes, because I think we're about to see salt.
Yeah.
Because it says here, and 11 we read, but it says, no meat offering which ye shall bring unto the Lord shall be made with leaven, for ye shall burn no leaven nor any honey in any offering of the Lord made by fire. Now 12 is where we were leaving off, and we got about 10 minutes,
Yeah,
so we
it
should
says-
cover everything. But it says,
What's up?
as for the oblation of the first fruits, okay, ye shall offer them unto the Lord, but they shall not be burnt on the altar for a sweet savor. So this is when you're giving, it says an oblation of your first fruits. So like when you have your harvest and you're bringing your grains and you're like, here, God, here's my offering for that. And over in Exodus, it says, my reference here says Exodus 23:19.
They had storehouses, right?
They did. So Exodus, I'm going to read the 23:19 because that was my reference here, and I just want to see exactly what it says. But it says, the first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord thy God. Okay, so again, when you have your harvest, you take your grain, not ground yet, and you're going to give it. It said you're not supposed to burn that. Okay. It says, and every oblation of thy meat offering shalt thou season with salt. Okay, so everything that you're going to give, you're going to season with salt. Neither shalt thou suffer the salt of the covenant of thy God to be lacking from thy meat offering. With all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt. So you could do salt. Guys, salt's a pure ingredient. Salt comes from the earth.
So was this salt on the bread or just on the first fruit?
No, this is salt on the bread. Okay, it says all your offerings you offer it with salt. Now that first fruits, that's whole grain. That's not ground, because this, when this opens up, it says fine flour. Okay, or it says baked bread. Bread made in a pan. First fruits is just
Straight out of the harvest.
straight corn, straight wheat. All right. So that's what first fruits is. It says when you bring that, you're not supposed to burn that on the altar. Okay. So, but it said that you should use salt. Okay. And just like he said, again, parallel for us. But Jesus said, if the salt lost its savor, okay. He said, what good is it to be salted? He said, you cast it under the foot of men. So he said, be the salt of the earth. And if you make something without salt, guys, you'll notice it. All right? You'll notice it. And so it says in 14, it says, and thou offer, we only got 3 more verses. It says, and thou offer a meat offering of thy first fruits unto the Lord. Thou shalt offer for the meat offering thy first fruit green ears of corn dried by the fire, even corn beaten out of full ears. And thou shalt put oil upon it and lay frankincense thereon. It is a meat offering. Okay? And then it says, and the priest shall burn the memorial of it, part of the beaten corn thereof, and part of the oil thereof, with all of the frankincense thereof. It is an offering made by fire unto the Lord. So that last verse covers, it's still under the meat offering, but it covers like the first fruit offering. When you cut your wheat, it dries out, you thresh it out. It said, here's how you're going to handle that. It said, those first 3 verses, it says green corn, green ears of corn dried by the fire. I said, or corn beaten out of full ears. And guys, when it says corn, it just means grain. They're not. It's not Indian corn. It's not corn on the cob. It's wheat. Okay.
You get it dry.
Yeah. It says by the fire, dried out by the fire. And then it says, and you put oil on it. Okay. And then you put frankincense on it. It says it's a meat offering. It says, and the priest burns the memorial of it, part of the beaten corn thereof, part of the oil. So part of the beaten corn, part of the oil. It said, and then all the frankincense that's there. Okay. It said, it is an offering made by fire unto the Lord. So, ladies and gentlemen, the whole thing about these meat offerings that you need to know, it's not tied to sin. This is not, God, I've sinned, here's a meat offering. This is that you're giving to support the ministry. You're giving out of your love for the Lord. You're giving back because, for that matter, God controlled the harvest. And I know even today, we've got bioengineered food, and we've got all the pesticides and herbicides, and we've got everything, and we've got all the fertilizer in the world. But, ladies and gentlemen, who still controls the harvest? And it's God. Yeah. Okay, so you're giving because God is going to give you. Okay, of the earth. He told Adam, he said, you're going to work. He said, for your sake, the ground is going to bring forth. He said, and you're going to work. So, it's given because God has again, at the end of things, like we said a second ago, God's always got the bigger shovel. God gave it to you first, and you're going to give a little bit back to Him. All right?
One
And-
soweth, one waters, but God gives the increase.
Exactly. We've got about 5 minutes left. I don't want to go ahead and start with the next one. I like how we're doing this, and I didn't plan it this way. I'm glad it's working out this way, to do one sacrifice each time as we're starting off. And that's about a chapter each time. So I don't want to go ahead and keep going. We've got about 5 minutes left. What comments, questions do you guys have?
I got one thing, I used, was in a revival in a church, and they take up their offerings, just like everybody else. But they had designated offerings. They had an offering for the church, to take care of anything in the church, but they had an offering that set aside in case the needy come by. I mean, a special offering
Yeah.
that they could help a neighbor or whatever with.
Did they ever bring fruit? I mean, well, what about the apples? Like one farmer, he may just do apples.
Yeah.
Or this farmer here may
Yeah.
do oranges. Did they never mention about that in there? Grapes?
It doesn't. I don't have a good answer for you with that, Milford.
Did
I
you
don't.
notice that corn was dry? They pulled all the sap out of that corn.
Yeah.
There wasn't no juice in it.
Yeah.
I just wondered, I looked at that and I wondered,
Yeah.
they didn't want to sacrifice it.
Yeah.
But even the Lord eats that corn.
Yeah.
Himself is what he does.
Yeah.
Buccaneers.
All right. Anybody else? Comments, questions? Anybody? She don't cover the baby. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your attention. We'll cover next week. We'll cover a peace offering, and I was starting to write the offerings up here, and I'm not going to just give the title of what all of them. I'll give just the title of what all of them are. Okay. So the next one that we're going to cover next week is a peace offering. That one is different than a meat offering. And then we're going to see, because everybody was asking about this, the sin. Oh, man, why am I? Sin offering, okay? All right, and then we're going to see a sin offering for certain things that you're supposed to do to sin offering. And I don't know, I was looking over that chapter with the sin offering. That might take us 2 weeks to cover just that chapter. But the burnt offering, again, is just the dedication to God, burning the whole thing. The meat offering is not tied to sin. You're just giving just because. And then next week we'll cover the peace offering. And then we're going to see about all the ways you're supposed to handle a sin offering. All right. Anybody comments, questions? All right. Thank you for your attention. Larry, I'll turn it back over to you.
March the 2nd,